You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 37, Brink.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Charlene Schmidt.
And I'm Marina Kravchuk. And just like our flagship Mission Log podcast, each week here on Mission Log Prodigy, we discuss each and every episode of this animated series, discover what makes each one of them special, and see if there are any morals, meanings, or messages that we may have learned.
This week, we're on Brink. Please remember that Mission Log Prodigy is an in-depth review podcast, so if you've not seen this episode yet, you might want to put us on pause, go watch the episode, and then come back. We'll still be here. It'll be fine.
Mission Log Prodigy is produced for YouTube and as a regular podcast, so please be sure to engage the like and share buttons and subscribe to us here on Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel. And if you listen to an audio-only version, please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow Mission Log Prodigy on X, formerly known as Twitter, at ML_Prodigy, and now on Instagram at Mission Log Prodigy to keep up with all our latest news and updates.
And before we get going for realsies, let's remind everybody why our podcast is so unique. We want to hear from the cadets, the younger Prodigy fans out there who make our show way better than we do. Like, we're okay, but they're great. And right now, we want to hear what our cadets thought of the episode Touch of Grey. So, here's what you do. You record a voice message and you tell us the following. What's your name and age? Did you like the episode? What was your favorite part? And what did you learn? Then you send that file to missionlog-prodigy@roddenberry.com and you make sure it reaches our inboxes no later than November 2nd, and that way we get you into the show.
Yep. And we have one more thing to tell you before we jump into this week's episode. And that's to tell you about our giveaway. We can win some really nice Prodigy merch, like a full set of Prodigy Cast Fansets pins. And that is just one of the prizes that you could win. So you head over to the link in the description of this episode for the link to enter. And speaking of which, also stay tuned to the end of this video because we will be giving you a secret code that you can only find here in this episode. With all that said, let's kick things off for this show by answering the same questions we ask our cadets. So, Char, did you like the episode?
Oh yeah, definitely. It feels like our story is coming together. We're diving into the seriously consequential plot points now. Like, it really does feel like we're turning into the end of our season, our story, as we should be. Still, nevertheless, what a ride. How about you?
Oh yeah, it's a great episode. I mean, finally we have all story threads, all woven together, moving in the same direction, so the tapestry is almost complete. And yeah, we are most definitely heading into the final stretch. I admit I was at the edge of my seat when at the very end, Wesley just proclaims that, oh shoot, we're on the wrong path. He has no idea what's going to happen. So we literally are on the brink. So, do you have a favorite part? Do you have a favorite part?
Yeah, I got a couple of them. So one is the first one. I can't help myself. It's on the funny side, and it's Zero's, I guess, puppeteering of the unconscious Vonnegut guard, where he does that lean, so casual with the limp body. Reminds me of The Weekend at Bernie's movie, which is about a dead guy, but it was a childhood favorite, okay? And on the serious side, I love the look between Dal and Gwyn just before Dal unleashes the site-to-site transporter. That felt like a really earned moment between those two. So yeah. I have to give a shout out to that as well. How about you?
Yeah, that's true. Same thing. I had a couple of favorites. I really like the sort of the twist, the reveal that the current time and space Ascensia is actually a very decent person who's fully against all of her older self's actions, and she's actually on our side. And speaking of funny sides, that moment when Dal goes, "There's two of her? Of course there's two of her. Oh, I hate time travel." That was just so perfect. And as I already mentioned, that moment where all of a sudden at the very end, Wesley just says, "Oh, great, we're on the wrong path." I have no idea. It's literally sort of a, okay, stomach-dropping moment. What's going to happen now?
Right? If Wesley doesn't know what's going to happen, what's going to happen?
So, what did we learn?
Well, I think I learned a lot from Gwyn in this episode. And it's because when you think that you might make the very best decision you can in a moment, and it might actually be a fatal flaw. It might also not be. And it's really hard to know what that is and when. Life is unpredictable. And for us non-travelers, it's meant to be that way, but it can be pretty hard to stomach. And I feel like that's what Gwyn is going through right now.
Yeah.
How about you?
No, I agree. You, as you said, best decisions. But the thing is that for Starfleet officers, especially the ones who have to make hard calls, you basically condition yourself to make the best decision based on information on hand in that moment. That's something that you have to be able to do instead of just going, well, I'm not sure. You have to call it. So in this case, Gwyn was in an impossible situation. Nevertheless, she handled it correctly. That's all the information she had, and she called it. Let's split the group, go and see what's going to happen. And that kind of leads me to another point here, is that communication is key. And in this case, it's the communication between Wesley and the group. So they didn't know. The only one who was literally looking at it, so like, yeah, we need to stick together, was Majel as a Vulcan. She was taking it in the literal sense, whereas everybody else, I was like, well, we did our thing. We got Chakotay. Everything's fine. We kind of sorted together, as Zero said, spirit of things.
Yes.
But in this case, had Wesley communicated better, we probably would not have been in this situation. The whole thing would have ended the moment we saved Wesley, for all we know.
So what you're saying is there's going to be some really good discussion points later.
Yeah. And of course, the last part of it is that the how much damage fear can cause when you unleash it on grand scale. When we see Solum, the huge change in a matter of very little time, when it goes from a vibrant, highly developed society to this completely horrifying, dystopia. So again, we're going to talk about this later.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Thank you, Marina, for your answers to this week's questions. Now it's time for the recap for Brink. This one is written by Deandra Pendleton Thompson and directed by Rulin Lee. We begin with a flashback where Wesley shows up in a lab with Ascensia and a team of scientists. They're playing it fast and loose while creating a wormhole. Wesley shuts it down and warns her that her reckless actions endanger everyone. She finds this interesting, sort of, and while Wesley disarms the guards surrounding him, she gives him a little burst of energy from the wormhole machine, which knocks him out. And that is how Ascensia captured Wesley. In the present, Voyager is on her way to Solum. Their mission? Disable the technology that nearly destroyed them and prevent a full-out war. It's a tall order for a Starfleet ship that might trigger a war simply by showing up, and as the senior staff discusses the situation in the briefing room, Gwyn offers another idea. She and her crew will go. They're not technically Starfleet, and they could gather intelligence on Ascensia's arsenal without raising as many alarms. It's a winning proposition, since it technically does not violate Jellicoe's orders or the Prime Directive, and it's Gwyn's right to help her people. It's their best shot at a peaceful resolution to this situation. Janeway agrees, and also agrees to offer Ilthuran asylum if Gwyn and her team can rescue him. As Janeway sees Gwyn out of the ready room, the opening doors startle the rest of the crew, who, of course, were not eavesdropping on the other side. Gwyn announces they have work to do. On this mission, they cannot be seen, cannot be heard, and cannot fail. They will have to hide their comm badges, and they won't have access to Voyager's transporters, just an emergency site-to-site transporter that will work once before detected. The door chimes, and Majel steps in. She informs the other cadets that she resigned from Nova Squadron so she could join their mission. Wesley said they all needed to stay together, so this was the logical move. As our crew continues prepping for the mission, Rock Talk demonstrates another gadget they'll have at their disposal, a short-range cloak generator. Murph demonstrates, and everyone's amazed. The device has just one flaw, though. It cannot cloak giggles. Janeway pages the crew to the bridge, and that means it's go time. Voyager has approached Solum while staying out of warp detection range. Scans of the planet show a whole fleet ready for launch. Janeway reminds the cadets that their mission is to gather information and rescue Ilthuran, not engage the Vanakot. If they're caught, they're on their own. As they prepare for transport, Dal recognizes the troubled look on Gwyn's face. She's nervous that this mission will end in disaster, just like the last time she was on Solum. Or, Dal reminds her, the opposite could happen. It's her mission, and she gets to make the calls. They will follow her lead. On Solum, Gwyn notices that the people on this once vibrant world now live in fear. Rock activates the short-range cloak, and they all shuffle along as they walk down the street. They receive an encoded message from Ilthuran's last known location, his observatory. Once there, Gwyn realizes that someone sent encoded messages from there after her father was taken. She activates the lore keeper, who says that Ascensia sent the encoded message. They are interrupted by Ascensia, but the younger version, who belongs in this time. She was working with Ilthuran on the uprising and gathering information about her older self's military preparations. She tells the crew the secret behind her older self's arsenal, WESLEYCRUSHER. She also informs them that Ilthuran is on board a prison transport to the Waste, a place no one returns from. Both Wesley and Ilthuran are important to the greater mission, so Gwyn makes the call that they will split into 2 teams and save both. Gwyn, Rock, Murph, and Zero take the cloak and make their way to the lab where Wesley is located. Nearby gravimetric power conduits make their invisibility blink on and off, and they act quickly as they knock out 2 armed guards and run inside. Meanwhile, Dal, Majel, Jankum, and young Ascensia find Ilthuran's prison transport, which he is boarding. What do they do now? Steal the whole train? Majel suggests a more subtle approach as she nerve pinches a guard, and they board the vehicle where they free Ilthuran. That was remarkably successful, but Gwyn and her team aren't having as much good luck. Zero senses Wesley's presence, but doesn't sense the Vaunikat guard turning the corner, whom Gwyn fights off. During that struggle, the guard fried the controls to the door of the room holding Wesley, so Murph wiggles through a small hole made by the firefight so he can open the door from the inside. To buy Murph some time, Zero props up the unconscious Vaunikat guard as 2 more guards approach. Gwyn says something in their native tongue that makes the guards laugh, and they go back from whence they came. Once inside the room, they find Wesley, who says they arrived right on time. He thinks, what star date is it? Yes, and he was expecting them to be here. It was all part of the plan, so Ascensia would invent the wormhole technology, and everything they've all been through was supposed to happen. Even the times they nearly died. But Wesley promises it will all be worth it at the end because Ilthuran will usher in a better future for the people of Solum. While this is a lot to take in, and the end result sounds great, Gwyn reminds Wesley that they all have to get out of here before anything else. He tries using his mental powers to bring them all back to Voyager, but after what Ascensia's put him through, his frazzled mind can't manipulate space-time. That's okay, though. He has an alternate plan, and with Rock's assistance, she punches their way through what used to be a wall so they can escape the lab. Once out, Wesley freaks out when he learns that Gwyn split up the crew. No, that was never part of the plan. When he said stick together, he just didn't mean team spirit. He meant that literally. Ilthuran would have been safe, but now this unexpected variable means that the future is uncertain. Gwyn feels horrible. She made the wrong choice. And that's when Rock spots Dal, followed by Jankum, Majel, Ilthuran, and Ascensia, along with several guards. Ascensia thanks Gwyn for this laughable escape attempt because now she knows that if things had gone differently, Ilthuran would have overthrown her. Now she has Wesley and Ilthuran, and Solum's future is hers. Gwyn apologizes. She wishes they could all go back together, but it's time for another hard call. Gwyn and Dal make eye contact, and he tries subtly pulling out the site-to-site transporter he has hidden in the back of his shirt. The guard catches him in the act, and Dal throws the object to Wesley as he orders 2 to beam up. Wesley and Ilthuran beam away to Voyager's bridge, where Wesley informs Janeway that it's not just her crew who's in danger, they're all in danger, and he does not know what happens next. The end.
Oh, the end, yeah.
Woo!
So, a lot of observations. I mean, as I was going
Shall
through,
we
it just
get into it?
yeah, thoughts just kept popping into my head. So, why don't you start?
Okay, well, you know what? That makes sense because for whatever reason, I always make observations on the very first thing that we see more often than not. And so right here in this opening flashback scene, I've got an observation, which is about the star date. Plus, after the star date, we get months ago. Not a specific number of months ago, just months ago. I know I did not do the calculations because calculating star dates is problematic anyway, but I'm just going to assume that they got it right.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure they did.
I'm counting on them.
We actually talked about it in one of the previous episodes, like how did Wesley get out? So we don't know precisely how he escaped the time ziggurat explosion. I mean, obviously he's very injured by the experience when we see that flashback, but I'm glad that we finally get an explanation on how Ascensia captured him. And given how that we know that Wesley planned this whole scenario, I'm guessing that he probably kind of nudged Ascensia scientists to actually devise that torture extractor collar. I mean, talk about sacrifices. This is kind of horrifying that he couldn't find another way to kind of put himself into this situation to affect the actions of Ascensia and everybody around. There's sort of a funny throwback when he actually says after the rescue, says, "Oh, my brain feels like it went through 10 rounds as a Nausicaan punchback." So we get a reference to Nausicans, the, giant aliens in TNG.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't think too much about Wesley going through a lot of suffering himself,
Yeah.
knowing that was going to happen and not cutting corners in that respect. Oh, that
Yeah.
might have to be something we save for the discussion, but you got my brain working now. I want to give some kudos to Ella Purnell in this episode. Gwyn has the weight of her world's fate on her shoulders, and now Starfleet's too. And
Yeah.
she does a fantastic job where you can sense the weight of all of this on her when she speaks. And kudos to Gwyn, because she's not deterred and she moves forward with the mission despite feeling all this pressure. Again, more to say on this in the discussion, because I think there's a lot of influences going into all of this, but wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot for anybody.
Now, we do get a quick mention of Prime Directive, which, as we know, is the main non-interference doctrine under which all of Starfleet operates. And in this case, the first contact or contacts, thanks to all the timey-wimey stuff, have already occurred. And Solum is most definitely in a state of comparable technological development. So, as Tysus points out, the interference in this case applies in terms of Starfleet being forbidden to take sides in what amounts to civil war in Solum. So that makes sense. They can't, which is the kind of the crux of the problem for poor Gwyn, who's like, yeah, we need peace among the worlds, but at the same time, she would also like to save her father.
Yes.
I like the fact that it's Chakotay this time around, who didn't really have much to do in this episode, but he repeats the previously mentioned mantras like Starfleet is stretched too thin that we've heard multiple times, primarily from Jellicoe. And
Yes.
I think that repeating statement kind of creates it's sort of like a seesaw. You have adults preoccupied by the issues and the lack of resources on the grander scheme of things, the way they're affecting the entire Federation, versus our young crew basically saying, look, we're here now, let me go. We have a solution or we have an idea. So that's kind of a nice balance that keeps repeating over the last couple of episodes.
That's a great back and forth. Yeah. I genuinely laughed when Dal made that line about playing poker, just because we saw them playing poker on the Enterprise D so much, but this is not that ship. For Voyager, I think maybe it's more Cod or Calto, Parisi Squares, maybe, not poker. And yet it does come back a little bit later with that whole ace in the hole kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed it just as a very, very subtle reference. And another nice little touch was seeing the crew get out of uniform since they can't represent Starfleet on the mission. Good thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. We kind of get used to it. A bunch of would-be cadets you just keep going on or ending up on highly dangerous missions with low probability of success all around without any backup. I mean, this is Voyager: The Next Generation.
Truly, yes, it really is.
Yeah. So something that emergency single-use site-to-site transporter, that reminded me of that little gizmo that Data had on him in Star Trek Nemesis. It was the same idea.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just that it's an emergency transport, and it's literally for, well, in this case, it was a single-person use. Here we had it was implied that the entire group should be able to beam out while using this thing, but it reminded me of Star Trek Nemesis.
I wonder if the site-to-site transport has a limited range where it really can't hold more than maybe one or two people under certain circumstances, and that's why Wesley and Ilthuran were beamed up, because they were close together.
It's possible. I mean, Dal did direct, two to beam up, so it probably was programmed to do whatever, but it was just a single use in the sense of like, that's it, we'll use it, can't beam again.
Right. And then you're done. You noted earlier that Majel really sticks to this plan, and even resigning from Nova Squadron, so she's technically not Starfleet. Talk about following the rule of law, which is interesting considering how upset Wesley gets when he finds out Gwyn split up the crew to save two people instead of one. Another thing I noticed was Brocktalk asking Tysus to bribble sit when they go on the mission. I have to wonder what made her choose him out of everybody else, not hologram Janeway, whom we've already seen that has a good time.
That's
But he
right.
seemed up to the task. It's it's kind of funny just because I guess it's out of convenience. Oh, you're here. Would you mind? Does he have the laser pointer thing? I mean, and also we learned that Bribble is a he and is mostly
Yeah.
potty trained.
Ish.
Yeah, ish, meaning there's been some time for potty training, but the potty training's not completed. Good luck, Tysus. You don't have anything else to do right now, do you?
This whole scene literally has exactly the same vibe as in I forget the name of the episode when Data is leaving Spot the cat with Worf. It literally, it's like yes, it's almost like anytime that he's a pretty cat and a good cat,
That's
I
right.
will feed him. This was exactly the. I mean, at least
You're a
Tysus
pretty
kind of
Bribble.
smiled.
Good Bribble. Okay, there's a missing scene there I really want to see now. Oh, well, okay. I've been giving out a lot of kudos so far in this episode, and I'm not going to stop because I got to give a shout out to Dal for supporting Gwyn when he saw that something was wrong and not making a stink about not leading the mission. This is definitely hers. And when he does question her about splitting up, it's not because he thinks he has the better idea or because he wants to be the leader. It's because it's simply to consider that they do need to actually stick together. There's like a big difference in the mentality and this dynamic. He defers when she makes her decision and supports it. And this is a major change. Love it.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting thought that Dal is actually looking at this whole thing from the point of practicality. They only have one emergency transporter, so they have to stick together.
Right.
This whole thing was stick together from what Wesley was saying. It's again Majel. She's the only one who's taking that literally. So we have a whole lot of mess going on here. Speaking of Gwyn, I love the fact that she steps out so strongly. She is leading the mission. She comes across very Janeway, and we're going to talk about this later. But it's like, that's an order. We're going, we're splitting, we're saving everybody. Yeah.
She even has Janeway's inflection. So yeah, there's definitely something going on there. This week's shout out to the art department goes to Solum's art transformation into a police state because that muted palette with twinges of red really reflects the fearful mood of the people walking around and randomly getting scanned and their reactions to that. It's exactly what you'd expect to find under these conditions. Yeah. So nice work.
Way too many shadows, way too many. I mean, it was really actually kind of cool to see the patrolling dreadnoughts, versions of dreadnoughts, and the Watcher bots again. Those were, the ones with the scorpion tails.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah, very much a callback to Tars Lamora in many ways.
Yeah, now that's a good call. We talked, I think, a couple of episodes ago about multiple Janeways and, Janeway and Admiral Janeway, what have you, multiple Janeways, 2 Janeways in deadlock. Well, Dal says, of course there's 2 in here as far as Ascensias go, and how that's such a frustrating thing. Oh no, time travel, headache. Whether it's helping to accomplish the Protostar's mission, leading the uprising on Solum, or both, I have a feeling that young Ascensia is like the sleeper character that's going to be that proverbial ace in the hole, just to invoke that poker term again.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to expect her to necessarily be a big part of the mission, maybe the uprising, but will it stop there? I don't think so, because she doesn't like her counterpart.
I love the fact that not unlike Ilthuran, young Ascensia is a completely different person compared to the older Ascensia. And I think it's a fun thing that the future monikers that they all acquired as they were about to travel into the past, the Diviner, the Vindicator, they actually fit the current versions of the characters as much as they do the future versions, only in the positive sense of the word meanings, something that we talked about in one of the previous episodes. So in many ways, she is the Vindicator, just as, Ilthuran, the one who's, divining the stars and hoping to bring up a better future.
Yeah, it's fitting.
I love the fact that I would love to find out, if that was meant to be, or was it just kind of naturally fits with the storyline.
Either way, totally works. Speaking of meanings, what I would not give for a Vaunakad dictionary, because apparently the universal translator is not working, even if they have their communicators on them. I would love to know what Gwyn said that made those guards laugh.
And that moment is actually my biggest question of this entire episode. We know that the crew beams down with the comm badges hidden under their clothes. So, the comm badges have the universal translator built in. So how come we get no translation when Vaunakad speak? Like we don't know what any of the guards are saying in like all the situations when the guards are encountering our crew. It's just nothing. And I'm curious why that is.
That's a very good question. Like, do they have to be on your chest connected to operate properly? Or I don't think so. I think we've seen other instances where they've worked. So you got me.
I mean, they're obviously working. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to understand each other. Remember, like the Dal and if everybody else. So
I'm trying to remember now. Like, do we know that Vaunakad language is difficult for the universal translator to persist on? That might be a really old detail that I'm not completely remembering now, but maybe that's it. Let us know. Comment on us social media and tell us, look, you're wrong. Or I'm right. Either way.
So we talked about a whole lot of funny bits, and there were plenty in this episode. And I kind of love the fact that we have this, high drama. Meanwhile, something else is happening, and you just can't help but crack up a little bit. That whole moment of walking together under the cloak. That was that was just such slapstick, And Gwyn's like, okay, let's just come down, let's shuffle together, and then of course Jankum almost, makes a mess, and Rock just like, shuttle quieter. Speaking of Jankum.
Yeah, he's always got a good one.
When it's like, okay, who sent the message? Ascensia. Oh my goodness. Obviously, they think it's the older Ascensia. They walk straight into the trap, and the first thing that comes out of his mouth, Starfleet disavows us. Oh, it's a great way to give away the game, isn't it? And I love the fact when the gravimetric conduits are screwing with the cloak, and Zero says like, okay, everybody just stay still. Don't breathe. That's coming from a Medusan who doesn't actually breathe.
Easier said than done, friend.
Yeah, so great writing. Oh,
really good stuff. I love the juxtaposition, by the way, of funny moments mixed in with this really high impact drama. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is really high stakes pressure that we're under here, and yet we're still making some time for a couple of laughs. Good stuff.
So, speaking of cloak, now that we're discussing it, so as we know, or for those folks who don't know, it just so happens that the cloaking technology is still illegal, as far as we know. If you remember in the beginning of the season, there's actually a discussion between the senior officers saying the existence of Infinity was breaking several Federation treaties, most likely involving the Treaty of Algeron that completely prohibited the development of cloaking technology.
That's right.
And yet we have Rock just, oh, by the way, saying, oh, here's the short-range cloak generator that was modified from experimental force field. So there's apparently research still ongoing. I mean, again, we don't know. Perhaps it's allowed to some degree, but given the whole situation with Infinity, I somehow doubt it. So not only they're going down into the situation of no backup, very dangerous, low probability of success, they're also carrying illegal technology with them.
Possibly, yeah. We are probably missing some key details here as to the legalities of this. It's the fine print, if you will.
Yeah, so I would love to hear, like, if we ever get to check in with Aaron again, all these tiny little things, like, well, so what were the thoughts on the cloaking technology in Prodigy? There's got to be an explanation.
Yes.
Something of a fun throwback to the larger Star Trek universe is, of course, the fact that Majel performs a Vulcan nerve pinch, which is something that we all, hold near and dear, that has been around since the 1960s, since the original series. And I have to say, thank goodness that it works, because who knows where Vaunakad have the nerves to pinch in that area? Like, do they? If you remember in Star Trek 6, one of the characters says, like, not everybody keeps the same organs, and I'm paraphrasing here, in the same place.
The same place.
So, for all we know, Vaunakad's, neck nerve pinch would actually have to be, I don't know, armpit or I don't know, side of the body somewhere,
right,
but not the actual neck. Anyway, we get the
Yeah,
illustration of a
like you
very
said,
important
thank
thing in
goodness
Star
that
Trek
worked.
lore.
Whatever it is she pinched.
But yeah, and Magellan's just being Magellan, so yay.
But is a nerve pinch a more subtle approach? I guess in this situation it is. But now that you bring up body parts not always in the same location between species, that was quite a risk. Wow.
It is. I mean, come to think of it, I mean, we do have Gwyn, who probably has been scanned and everything, so Sigbay would have her information. That is probably not information that Magellan would be privy to. So that's why I'm like, well, that was a risky move, and thank goodness that it worked.
I love it. So I have a question. If our crew had stuck together and all went according to Wesley's calculations, who would have broken Ilthuran out from the waste? Like the uprising, our crew, how do they get back if no one comes back from there? Like, this is an alternate universe story I'd love to see sometime. And then also, speaking of Star Trek 6 references, this place reminded me a little bit like Rua Pente. Not because it's some snowy place, but just because it's so dire.
Place somebody and people don't come from. Don't return from, I should say. I am curious about the concept of waste. I mean, it does sound like it's an existing place. It's not just something that, this thing and we're going to call it waste. But is it the prison locale thanks to older Ascensia rising to power? And she just previously maybe just, it's a dangerous geographical area that Vonnegut just simply avoided traveling to. Or, given how, prosperous and highly developed society Solum is, but it doesn't have, it's not without its dark corners, let's put it this way. So that's another thing. I mean, we get a lot of universe building in terms of Solum, a lot of exposition, but I am curious about the wastes. Like, what exactly is this place supposed to be? Was it there from the beginning? What was its purpose before Ascensia usurped the power?
Yeah, good questions.
Yeah. All right, so in the tradition of Mission Log, we dedicate a great deal of time to discuss some of the finer points of the episodes we review to see what types of morals, meanings, and messages we can discover. So, Char, what did you find most meaningful and memorable of this episode?
Well, I have a big question after all of this. Is what Gwyn did a mistake, or, to call back another episode, an unexpected variable? Because Gwyn feels that she made the wrong choice in splitting up the crew so that they could save Ilthuran and Wesley. But the more I think about this, the more I think, you made the very best decision you possibly could have, Gwyn. And I'm reminded of that fantastic quote from Picard in The Next Generation. It's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. This is not a weakness. This is life. Sometimes no matter what you do, you're still going to lose. And the future does seem uncertain now. But what if it isn't? Because I'm speaking as a non-traveler. I never have any idea what comes next in the future. And the future is uncertain all the time. And all you really can do is make the best decision you can. And so for Wesley, I find it a little comical almost, just because he didn't start off as a traveler. He was not necessarily born a traveler, but has gotten so used to that mentality of knowing what comes next that he is very frightened when he realizes that he doesn't. Well, welcome to equal footing, Mr. Crusher.
Well, something that I just thought of, we already had a moment in the time ziggurat. Remember when Wesley realized that it's supposed to be seven of them, 7 elements, 7 spices to the
That's
rebellion
right.
element. So perhaps we are at the moment where it's like, yes, the stratagem is ruined. It's not, we're on the wrong path. Maybe we're not. We just don't know. We didn't realize that, an additional variable dropped in and something else is going to happen, and hopefully a good thing. Well, we shall see. We only have 3 episodes left after all.
Right.
Speaking of Gwyn, I saw the moment when she split the crew. I was not exactly thinking that, shouldn't they be sticking together? But my first thought was that she was literally creating her own version of Kobayashi Maru. The situation that cannot be solved either way, because they're already in a very dangerous situation where they're dealing with a maniac, and again, low probability of success for this whole thing. They have no backup, and yet she's adding more to it, despite what Janeway told her, do not engage. She's splitting the group, and she's trying to literally save everyone. So in this case, it's like, yes, she was kind of walking into the situation where things can go wrong at any moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I love how that is so not, at least it wasn't on my mind when I watched the episode. Like, this is your fatal mistake, Gwyn.
Yeah.
But no. And yet later on it feels so consequential. Okay, and we got to talk about how things are a means to an end and on opposite ends. Like on one end, we have Wesley, who is really like super casual, I would say, about starting a war with Solum and Zero losing their body because it's all a means to an end that, as far as he knows, works out. And I think it's great to see, especially like a character like Zero,
Yeah.
who like getting angry a little bit and calling out like, I lost my body, I could have died. And like, yeah, it makes me think, okay, on the other side of the equation, Ascensia feels that the end result of her actions will justify everything else as well, because it's for the greater good of Solum. And these are two calculating characters on opposite ends who think they have it figured out. We know that Ascensia doesn't really care if her methods are cruel, but I want to pose the question, what if it's also cruel that Wesley is doing this? Like, I understand he can't tell them what's going to happen, but I also understand why the crew feels upset, because they do have to go through so much. And Wesley knew, he let it happen. So what is your take on that? And this also ties back into what you were saying about what he went through as well. So is this all just everybody has to suffer a little bit?
No, I see, because Wesley technically is a being that operates on a completely different level. We're talking different scales. So in this case, I think it's one of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, where communication is important. The devil is in the details, as the saying goes. So plus overconfidence. He feels that he worked it out. I mean, look at all the check my equations. It's a foolproof plan. Now, we've dealt with this on a smaller degree with our crew. Dal rushing headlong and like knowing, oh, I know what to do. Now it's kind of rearing its head on the part of Wesley, who, okay, granted, again, he's mentally balancing the big picture on a scale of multiple universes, multiple timelines. But I think it's a situation where he's missing the trees for the forest. The other way around. It's, like that moment where they're rescuing him and he completely misses that only half of the group is actually there. So it kind of illustrates the fact that, that's it. He's already so far ahead in his stratagem, in his plan, that he's not even noticing that little things are not actually where they're supposed to be, at least according to what he was hoping. So, yeah, it all comes down to like this particular situation. Where would we be if Wesley actually clarified what like, without necessarily like, okay, I can't explain to you, I can't give you the details of the future that I'm trying to push all the actions into, but if he just clarified the meaning of stick together, for example, would we be in this mess?
Maybe not. So maybe he really should have said more. Less is not more in this sense. Well, how about we pivot to the next thing that we have been alluding to for our discussion. We got to talk about Gwyn pulling inspiration from Janeway as she leads this mission. It's in her intonation, it's in her actions. This is also not the first time that it's happened either.
Yeah.
It's really nice to bring this back because it has been a while. But I think Janeway's willingness to keep going is what's keeping Gwyn going, despite the heaviness of it all. Like, you learn how you're led. And that's Gwyn right now with Janeway's example. And Janeway's putting a lot of trust into her. And therefore, Gwyn will not let her down. And there's points in this episode where, as Gwyn is leading the mission, you can almost hear her thinking, what would Janeway do? Janeway wouldn't leave a member of her crew behind. It's one of her 3 rules. And I think that is a big way that informed her call to save Wesley and Ilthuran.
Oh, I agree. And, I couldn't have said this better myself. Over and over again, we're reminded just what a great character Janeway is. Her ability to inspire, to give opportunities when needed, second chances, the guts to make tough calls. And, realistically, it's not just Gwyn. Dal most certainly looks up to her. Like if you go way back, I mean, at some point, I'm pretty sure he's also looking her at a sort of mother figure, along with a great mentor and a leader. So, but yeah, this is a wonderful thing. And as already mentioned, it's great to see Gwyn really step up in terms of, being the leading member of our little group.
Absolutely. And no pressure at all. Just save everybody.
So I think we covered pretty much everything that we had on our plate. There's a lot of things that happened in this episode again, and again, we have only a couple of episodes left. So,
Yeah. So what are you thinking wrapping up?
bottom line is, well, I can't really say it better than Wesley did. We're all in danger. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. It's I don't know. I mean, at this point, Ascensia has the group captured, so I have a feeling that we're probably going to be, I don't know, seeing what the senior officers will come up with, because are they going to save themselves, or are they going to need help from major help from Voyager, because this is an unwinnable situation, like again, Kobayashi Maru in a way. The biggest thing that I really liked out of like the entire arc of the episode is, again, this whole maturity that we were talking about, the evolution of the characters. There is a definite shift in Dal. There is a moment when he suggests a completely crazy plan. It's like, oh yeah, let's steal the whole plan, the whole train. But like when everybody goes, what? You're trying to kill us? He doesn't even attempt to follow through, or even, he's kind of
Yeah,
gotten
it's
to the
not a
point
good
where
idea.
He is comfortable with, being also a follower, rather than trying to be, rushing to be a captain like he used to in the early episodes, and then certainly in the first season.
Yeah.
And again, Gwyn stepping up in order to carry responsibility in a big way. So this was the big change.
Yeah.
Our
Now that
kids are growing up.
they really are. Oh my gosh. What I would love to see, now that you mention it, is I want to see our senior officers looking out for our kids, our want to be cadets, because they have been carrying the weight of this mission on their shoulders and could use a little bit of help here. So let's see them step it up. What I really love in this episode, though, is what's happening with Dal and Gwyn and everything that you just described. I mean, it's taken such a long time to get to this turning point, but it's a big turning point. Their understanding and their trust in one another is at a higher level now. And I can't wait to see how this might pay off in the future, because it does not seem like this is going to be over. You know what I mean? And as far as our story goes, oh gosh, let's go fast and watch the next one, because I want to know what happens next. Woohoo! Let's go.
Yes. So, we have reached the end of the episode. Before we go, we have one more thing to do, and that is to give you this special code I mentioned that you can use to enter our giveaway, and you'll find this code only here. So the code is WESLEYCRUSHER, WESLEYCRUSHER. To enter, you go to the link provided in the description of the episode, or you look for it in our social media channels.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. If you enjoyed our show, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the Mission Log Prodigy playlist on the Roddenberry Entertainment YouTube channel, or find us on the podcast catcher of your choice. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, production and technical direction by Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is at missionlogpodcast.com. And if you'd like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
And next week, we're going with A Touch of Grey. And cadets, don't forget to watch the episode and send us your thoughts no later than Saturday, November 2nd. We can't wait to hear what you have to say, and we will feature your voice messages at the end of our next show. But to close out this show, let's hear what our cadets have to say about Brink.
Receiving listener communications. Message playback begins.
What's your name and your age?
My name is Rook and my age is 9.
Rook, did you like the episode?
Yes.
What was your favorite part of the episode?
My favorite part of the episode was when Ronk barked the guy on the head.
Yeah, that made me laugh. What did you learn from the episode?
I learned from the episode that you shouldn't think that people would read your mind.
Right. Wesley didn't give very clear instructions, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.